What we are about to share today is one of the most moving courtroom stories of compassion and justice you'll ever hear. A story that proves, sometimes, the kindest hearts are the ones put on trial. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Sweet Justice and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another emotional courtroom story like this. Now, let's begin. The courtroom was unusually quiet that morning. A soft rain fell outside, streaking down the tall glass windows as a woman stood before the bench, her posture straight, but her eyes tired. Her name was Laura Bennett, a 42-year-old schoolteacher who had never been in trouble a single day in her life. Today, she was facing criminal charges. The judge looked down at the file. "Ms. Bennett, you are charged with unauthorized use of school funds and violation of administrative policy," he read aloud. The words echoed through the room. In the front row, a few of her students' parents sat in disbelief, shaking their heads. Laura didn't look like a criminal. She looked like what she was, a kind, hard-working woman who had spent 20 years shaping young lives. But the papers said otherwise. When the judge asked her if she understood the charges, she nodded quietly. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Yes, Your Honor, but I didn't take anything for myself. I just couldn't let those children go hungry." A quiet murmur spread across the courtroom. The judge raised a brow, intrigued. "Go on," he said, and as Laura began to tell her story, no one in that courtroom, not even the judge himself, was prepared for what they were about to hear. Laura took a deep breath before continuing. Her hands shook slightly as she gripped the edge of the defendant's table. "I've been teaching at Riverbend Elementary for nearly 20 years. She began softly. "It's not a rich neighborhood, Your Honor. Most of our students come from families that can barely afford lunch, let alone breakfast." The judge listened silently, nodding for her to go on. "There's one student I'll never forget," she said. "His name is Tyrell, 8 years old. Bright, funny, always raising his hand first in class. One day during math, I noticed he was quiet, quieter than usual. When I asked what was wrong, he just said, 'I'm fine, Miss Bennett.' But when the lunch bell rang, he stayed in his seat." Laura swallowed hard. "He didn't have anything to eat." She paused for a moment. "That day I gave him my own lunch. He smiled, said thank you, and went back to class like nothing happened. But I couldn't stop thinking about it." The courtroom remained still. Even the bailiff's usual stern face softened slightly. "I started noticing more and more kids skipping meals," Laura continued. "Some were pretending to forget their lunch money. Others just sat quietly, staring at their desks. One girl fainted during class. I found out she hadn't eaten dinner the night before." Her voice wavered, but she pressed on. "So I started buying extra sandwiches, juice boxes, granola bars. Every morning before school, I'd stop at the grocery store. I didn't tell anyone. I just wanted to help." The judge leaned forward slightly. "So you were purchasing food with your own money?" "Yes, sir," she replied. "At first? But then one of my colleagues saw what I was doing and told the principal. I thought maybe they'd support the idea. Maybe even start a small food fund for students." Her eyes dimmed. "But instead I was told it was against district policy. They said I couldn't give food to students without formal permission because of allergy risks, liability, and inventory records. They told me to stop immediately." "And did you?" the judge asked gently. Laura hesitated. "No, Your Honor, I couldn't." A murmur rippled through the spectators. "I had kids coming to school hungry every single day. You can't teach a child fractions when all they can think about is the last time they ate." The judge's expression softened, but his tone remained even. "So what happened next?" Laura sighed. "I started pooling money with a few other teachers. We made it quiet and no one was supposed to know. But then one of the cafeteria vendors noticed extra food purchases being logged under my school account. So, the accusation is that you misused school funds?" The judge clarified. She nodded. "Yes, it wasn't intentional. One of the invoices went through the school's account by mistake. I repaid it immediately when I realized, but by then it was too late. The district filed a report." Her attorney, a young public defender, interjected. "Your Honor, Ms. Bennett never profited from any of this. The amount in question was less than $312, all spent on food for children." The judge frowned slightly, flipping through the pages in the case file. "312? And they brought you here for that?" Laura looked down at her clasped hands. I think they wanted to make an example of me. The principal said, "Rules are rules, Laura. Compassion doesn't change procedure." A small gasp escaped from someone in the gallery. One of the parents, unable to contain themselves. Laura looked up again, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't want to break the law. I just didn't want those kids to suffer. When you see a child cry because they're hungry, it changes you. You stop thinking about policies and start thinking about humanity." The judge set his pen down. "Ms. Bennett, I've been in this courtroom a long time. I've heard every excuse there is, but I've also seen true integrity, and what you've described sounds like the latter." Laura nodded weakly, her throat tightening. "Thank you, Your Honor." The judge leaned back, sighing deeply. "This isn't just about money or rules. This is about intent, and I believe intent matters." As the judge paused to review the documents again, the silence in the courtroom grew heavy. Everyone could feel the emotion building. Finally, he looked up. "We'll take a short recess. When we return, I want to hear from one of your students. I need to understand the full impact of what you did." Laura blinked, stunned. "One of my students?" "Yes," the judge replied. "Someone who can tell this court who Ms. Bennett really is." And with that, he struck the gavel gently. "Recess for 10 minutes?" The sound echoed through the courtroom as Laura sat back, trembling, her mind racing between fear and hope. When the judge returned, the courtroom buzzed softly with murmurs of curiosity. Who would speak for Ms. Bennett? What student could possibly capture her true character? Then the bailiff opened the door and a small voice said, "Excuse me, sir. I'm here to talk about Miss Bennett." All eyes turned. A young boy walked in, maybe 9 years old, dressed in a neatly ironed shirt and worn-out sneakers. He clutched a small notebook in his hands, his knuckles white. The judge looked surprised. "And you are?" The boy straightened his back nervously. "My name's Tyrell, sir. Miss Bennett was my teacher last year." A wave of recognition swept through the room. Laura's hand flew to her mouth. "Tyrell?" she whispered. He gave her a shy smile before turning back toward the judge. "Your Honor," said the attorney, "this is Tyrell Carter. He insisted on speaking today. With your permission, he'd like to share something." The judge nodded gently. "Of course. Go ahead, young man." Tyrell cleared his throat, his voice trembling slightly. "Miss Bennett, she's the best teacher I ever had. When my mom lost her job, we didn't have food sometimes. She didn't make a big deal about it, she just helped." He paused, his little chest rising and falling fast. "She gave me sandwiches when I was hungry, and she'd tell me not to give up. She said one day I'd be the one helping others." A few people in the gallery wiped their eyes. Tyrell reached into his notebook and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She told me to always write down things I'm thankful for. I've been doing it every day since." The judge tilted his head, intrigued. "What does it say, son?" Tyrell unfolded the paper carefully, his small hands trembling. "It says, 'Today I'm thankful for Miss Bennett, because she made me feel like I mattered.'" The courtroom fell into complete silence. Even the judge sat motionless for a moment, visibly moved. Laura wiped her tears quietly, whispering, "Oh, sweetheart." The judge finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "Tyrell, that was very brave of you." "Thank you for sharing that," the boy nodded. "You shouldn't punish her, sir. She didn't do anything wrong. She just made sure we didn't go hungry." The judge smiled faintly. "You can go sit down now, Tyrell." As the boy returned to his seat, the emotion in the room hung thick, raw, unfiltered, and unforgettable. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, rising to speak. "Your Honor, while the child's testimony is certainly heartfelt, the fact remains. Ms. Bennett knowingly violated school district policy and used institutional accounts for unauthorized expenses. If we start excusing infractions based on good intentions, we erode the rule of law." The words sounded cold, almost metallic, against the warmth of what had just happened. Laura's attorney stood immediately. "With all due respect, the law also considers context, motive, and impact. This is not embezzlement or misconduct. It's compassion. She corrected the accounting error, repaid the funds, and harmed no one. If anything, she uplifted her community." The judge raised his hand. "Enough. I've heard both sides." He turned to Laura. "Ms. Bennett, is there anything you'd like to say before I render my decision?" Laura stood slowly. Her voice was calm, steady now, though her eyes still glistened. Yes, Your Honor. I know I broke the rules, I understand that. But I didn't do it to make a point or prove something. I did it because I couldn't look away anymore. Those kids, they remind me of my own childhood. My mom worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford lunch some days. I promised myself if I ever became a teacher, I'd make sure no child under my care would ever go hungry. She paused, glancing toward Tyrell. I guess I kept that promise, even if it cost me everything else. The judge exhaled slowly. His eyes lowered for a moment as if to hide the emotion building behind them. Ms. Bennett, sometimes the law and morality aren't the same thing, and when they collide, it puts people like me in very difficult positions. He leaned back, hands clasped. Do you regret your actions? Laura hesitated. Then quietly but firmly she said, No, Your Honor, not for a second. The courtroom erupted in quiet gasps. The judge didn't scold her. He simply nodded, deep in thought. I appreciate your honesty. Truly do. He looked over at the prosecutor. You may have the law on your side, counselor, but she has humanity on hers, and this courtroom was built for both. The prosecutor's lips pressed into a thin line, saying nothing. The judge leaned forward again. Ms. Bennett, I need a few moments to review everything before I pass judgment. This case deserves care, not speed. He stood. Court will reconvene in 15 minutes for the final verdict. The gavel struck softly as everyone began to rise. Laura turned slightly toward Tyrell and smiled through her tears. Thank you for being brave, sweetheart. He smiled back. You always said to stand up for what's right, Miss Bennett. I just did what you taught me. Her heart nearly broke. She nodded, whispering, You did perfect. The bailiff escorted her gently to a nearby bench as the room emptied. The weight of what was coming next pressed heavily in the air, and no one knew if justice would truly prevail. When the courtroom reconvened, the tension was palpable. The soft hum of whispers stopped the moment the judge stepped back in and took his seat. The air felt heavier, as if every breath depended on what he was about to say. Laura stood, her heart pounding. Tyrell sat quietly in the back, holding that same folded piece of paper, his tiny hands gripping it like a prayer. The judge adjusted his glasses and spoke slowly. Ms. Bennett, he began, I've reviewed your file, your record, and the testimony we've heard today. You've been a teacher for over 2 decades, not a single complaint, not a single blemish on your record. In fact, most of your evaluations describe you as an example to others. He paused, his gaze steady but full of thought. I've also reviewed the district's complaint. It states that you violated policy and misused school accounts. That's not something this court can ignore. Laura closed her eyes briefly, bracing for the inevitable. But, the judge continued, his tone softening, this court also recognizes the why behind your actions, and that why matters deeply. He leaned forward, his voice lowering. You fed hungry children. You did so out of compassion, not greed, not pride. You made a mistaken process, but your heart was in the right place. That's the kind of error this world could use more of, not less. A quiet murmur filled the room. Even the prosecutor looked down, uncomfortable. The judge took a slow breath. Ms. Bennett, I was raised by a school teacher myself, my mother. I remember her staying up late grading papers, spending her own money to buy supplies the school couldn't afford. She used to tell me, teaching isn't a job, it's a calling. I didn't understand that as a child, but I do now. He looked at her directly. And today I see that same spirit in you. Tears welled in Laura's eyes. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Now, legally, the judge went on, I could impose a fine or even a suspended sentence. But I don't believe punishment is what justice requires here. He turned to the prosecutor. Counselor, does the district truly wish to proceed with criminal charges against a teacher who spent her own money to ensure children were fed? The prosecutor hesitated, his earlier confidence gone. Your Honor, the district only wanted to uphold the policy. They didn't. The judge interrupted gently. Then let the record show that the district has made its point. He lifted the gavel but didn't strike it yet. Instead, he looked at Laura once more. "Ms. Bennett, the court hereby dismisses all charges against you, effective immediately." The room gasped, a wave of relief sweeping through every corner. Laura blinked in disbelief, her hand covering her mouth. "But," the judge added, smiling faintly, "I am assigning you a different kind of sentence." Laura looked up, confused. "Your Honor, I'd like to personally donate $500 to your classroom fund to make sure no child goes hungry again. And I'll be writing to the district board recommending they establish an official student meal assistance program inspired by your actions." For the first time that day, Laura laughed through her tears. The courtroom broke into soft applause. Even the bailiff, who rarely showed emotion, nodded approvingly. Tyrell jumped to his feet and cheered, "She won!" before his mother gently pulled him back down, whispering, "Shh," through happy tears. The judge smiled warmly. "Ms. Bennett, justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about recognition. You reminded all of us what compassion looks like in its purest form." He struck the gavel lightly. "Case dismissed." The echo of the gavel seemed to linger, not as a sound of authority, but of hope. Laura turned toward Tyrell and the others who had supported her. She walked over, kneeling down so she could meet his eyes. "Looks like we both learned something today, huh?" she said softly. Tyrell grinned. "You always said doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard." She smiled. "That's right." He held up the paper again, his thankful list, and added, "I'm writing today's one right now." Laura tilted her head. "Oh, yeah? What's it say?" He scribbled something quickly and held it up for her to see. It read, "Today, I'm thankful that kindness won." Laura pressed her hand to her heart, unable to stop the tears this time. "Me too, sweetheart," she whispered. "Me too." The camera of the courtroom journalist clicked once, capturing the moment, the teacher and her student both smiling through tears. It would later be shared thousands of times online, under the caption, "The Day Justice Had a Heart." As Laura walked out of the courtroom into the sunlight, the rain had stopped. The air smelled fresh, clean, like a new beginning. She looked up, closed her eyes, and smiled. For once, the world felt just a little bit better.